Hey, what's up? My name's Sammy and welcome back to A Good Chew. Today I'm making a Brûléed preserved lemon tart, but I don't have any preserved lemons, so I'm going to use a bit of a cheat. So let's get on with it.
Okay, first up we're going to make some sweet short crust pastry. Start with 150 grams of plain flour in a bowl and sift in 50 grams of icing sugar. Add that to a food processor along with a pinch of salt. Add in 75 grams of diced unsalted butter that's been sitting in the freezer for 15 minutes. Pulse it to cut the butter through the flour until it looks like fine breadcrumbs. Add 1 egg yolk and give it another pulse. When that's been distributed, add 1 tablespoon of cold water, or enough until it just starts to come together as a dough. If it's too dry at this point, just add a little bit more water. Tip the dough out onto your surface and bring it together by slightly kneading it with your hands and pressing it together. You want to work it as little as possible at this point. Overworking it starts developing the gluten in the flour and making it much harder to roll out, and it's likely to shrink when baking. And we definitely don't want that. Shape it into a disc, wrap it in cling film and leave it in the fridge for at least 30 minutes. This is enough pastry for 5 small tarts or 1 large one. While that's chilling, we can make the Cheats preserved lemon. Start by taking a peeler and removing all the skin from 6 lemons. After this, I go back and look through all the peels to remove any of the white pith from underneath using a small serrated knife. Hold the peel at one end using your finger and make small back and forth slices to remove it. The pith is really bitter and we don't want that. And once they're all de-pithed, arrange the peels into stacks and slice them lengthwise into strips or julienne. Turn those 90 degrees and dice it into fine chunks. This is something that's inherently rustic, so super fine knife skills are not necessary here. Transfer all the peels into a small saucepan, then squeeze over all the juice from the lemons. Add 2 teaspoons of salt and bring that to a boil, then simmer for 10 minutes. This recipe is by Anna Hansen from her cookbook The Modern Pantry, named after her London restaurant. I've made this loads of times before, and it is great when you don't have real preserved lemons on hand. I know a certain previous employer of mine might not necessarily agree with this cheats method, but I like it, and it saves space in my tiny apartment. When the timer goes off, transfer it to a large bowl and stick it in the fridge. Right, next we can roll out the pastry. Grab it out of the fridge and then flour your surface. Using a rolling pin, tap down on the surface of the pastry just to get it going, then start rolling it out, keeping an even pressure and every so often turning it 90 degrees. You may see some cracks appear, just push them back together and keep rolling. Roll this out to about 3 or 4 millimeters thick and just make sure the pastry hasn't stuck to your surface while doing so. Use your tart case as a guide to cut the pastry to shape, then gently pick up the pastry and start forming it into the case. Ease it in and make sure it gets right into the corners. You can use a scrap piece of pastry for that too. Repeat this with the other cases with all of the rolled pastry, and use a rolling pin to trim off the top edge. Take all those scraps and then roll them to form another tart. You're only seeing 4 tarts where there should be 5. Unfortunately, I couldn't find my 5th case, so annoyingly it meant I had leftover pastry and filling. My bad. Top the bottoms of the pastry with a fork, then put them in the freezer for at least 15 minutes to chill and rest. These chilling stages are vital in making good pastry, so make sure you don't skip them. Cold pastry holds its shape when baking and just makes it easier to handle. Now let's make the filling. It's based on a key lime pie filling and is very easy to make. Crack 3 medium eggs into a large bowl with 1 egg yolk. Add 1 395 gram tin of sweetened condensed milk and whisk to combine. Then add 150 grams of the chilled preserved lemon and whisk again. Keep that to the side for now. When your pastry is chilled enough, take it out of the freezer. Cut 4 squares of parchment paper, then scrunch them up into a ball. Open it out into the tart, then fill it with a baking weight of your choice. I use rice here, but you can use ceramic beans, dry lentils, or even your spare change. Put them on a tray into a preheated 170 degree oven and bake for 15 minutes. Then remove the paper and the weights and return it to the oven for another 5 minutes or until golden brown. We can now spoon the filling into the tarts, fill them to just below the edges as these will rise a little in the oven. Bake again at 170 for 10 minutes, then check. They should have a set wobble and shouldn't be wet to the touch. Chill them on a wire rack, and after about 5 minutes, or when cool enough to handle, they can be carefully removed from the cases. Cool them completely in the fridge for at least 1.5 hours. Okay, now for the fun part. Once the tarts are cool, sprinkle a thin layer of caster sugar on top. Take your blowtorch so the tip of the flame is barely touching the sugar, and patiently melt and brown the sugar. If you think it's starting to get too hot, just move the flame away and let that area cool slightly. It takes practice, but knowing when to stop is the most important part. The reason I hold it in my hand while doing it is to constantly turn it so I can distribute the melted sugar. It may seem dangerous, but I'm well versed using blowtorches. If you're not quite ready for that kind of method, setting up a wire rack over a tray is an easy way to start. And if you don't have a blowtorch on hand, you can use the grill setting on your oven to brûlée them, although you have to be very careful, otherwise you could burn the pastry. So there you go, cheating isn't always bad. These tarts have so much brilliant contrast, sweet, salty filling, crunchy sugary top, and a buttery flaky pastry. These are amazing little sweet treats. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and give it a like. What should I brûlée next? Let me know down in the comments. Cheers.